I have met two men in their 50s and 60s in the last 7 days who have clearly been misdiagnosed with type 2 diabetes when they actually have type 1. If you or someone you know has been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and it just doesn't quite make sense, like they don't have all the other signs of type 2 diabetes, you've got to watch this video. Now, you might think I'm being dramatic, but misdiagnosing type 1 diabetes as type 2 is becoming increasingly common. Here's the problem. Many doctors still believe that type 2 diabetes only develops in adulthood and type 1 diabetes only develops in childhood. This is not true. That's why they don't call it juvenile diabetes anymore. That's why we call it type 1. Because type 1 diabetes can develop at any age. In fact, more than half of new cases of type 1 diabetes develop in people over 30 years old. Okay, so there were two men on totally different separate occasions that I met in the last week who were clearly misdiagnosed with type 2 diabetes. The first man was traveling with his family and they were guests in my Airbnb, which is an apartment in the basement of my home. As they were packing up their car, I was doing some work in the garage and the garage door was open and he saw my CGM on my arm and he said, "Hey, you have diabetes?" I said, "Yes, that's my CGM. I live with type 1. So he tells me that he's been diagnosed with prediabetes and it's on its way to becoming type 2. And he says, "I just have a terrible diet. It's all because of my diet." Now I'm looking at this man. He's in his early 60s probably. He looks very fit. He does not look even remotely overweight. This is a red flag. This is a sign that you've been misdiagnosed. But he was so focused on the fact that his diet wasn't perfect that he assumed, well, that's what's led to my diabetes. Most people's diets aren't perfect. You don't have to eat some perfect organic salad, chicken, steamed broccoli diet to prevent diabetes. The second man I met in the last week who had clearly been misdiagnosed with type 2 diabetes was in his early 60s, maybe late 50s. But here's the thing. He was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 20 years ago. That means he was around 30 years old, he said, when he was diagnosed. And I asked him, when you were in your early 30s, were you living with obesity? Did you have all the other signs of type 2 diabetes, like high cholesterol, high triglycerides, high blood pressure? He said, "No, not really. I have lost 20 pounds recently, but I was never obese." For a person in their early 30s to develop type 2 without obesity, that really doesn't quite make sense. But here's the other thing. His A1C right now is 12%. 12% means his blood sugars are running way high 200s and in the 300s all the time. This man, unfortunately, has been blaming himself for his 12% A1C. He says, "I'm just not doing enough. I'm not eating a good diet." He is already on insulin, but only long-acting insulin. So here's what his doctor said to him recently. She said, "I'm going to start treating you like you have type 1, even though you have type 2. What she means is, I'm going to start giving you mealtime insulin to go along with your long-acting insulin." Now, clearly, if this man's A1C is up at 12%, he's not on enough long-acting insulin. But also, he has been needing mealtime insulin, rapid-acting insulin, for a very long time. And I kept saying, "Hey, this is your doctor's fault, not yours. It's not just your diet." He goes, No, I don't make good choices with food." No, if you have enough insulin, if you have the tools that your body needs, yeah, we need to make healthy choices around food most of the time for our overall health, but still, an A1C in the 12s, your doctor should have seen this a long time ago and gotten you on more insulin. Both of these men, I am certain, have been misdiagnosed with type 2 diabetes when they actually have LADA, also known as type 1.5 or latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. But LADA is type 1 diabetes. It's just a very slow developing form of type 1 diabetes. Okay, so both of these men need to get 2 types of tests to properly confirm which type of diabetes they have. First, they need a C-peptide test. A C-peptide test measures how much insulin your pancreas is producing. In a person with type 2 diabetes, C-peptide levels are very high because the pancreas is trying to produce enough insulin to keep up with the body's demand for more insulin. In type 1 diabetes, C-peptide levels are very low because the immune system is attacking and destroying the cells in your pancreas that produce insulin. So you are not making very much insulin. Now, in someone who's in the earlier stages of type 1 diabetes, like the first man I described who's been diagnosed with pre-diabetes, his C-peptide levels might still kind of be up there, right? Because his blood sugar levels are rising, but they're not crazy high yet. So he's still producing some insulin, far more than me. Okay, so that's why both men need a second type of test. This test is autoantibody testing. Some clinics actually have a type 1 diabetes evaluation panel that your doctor can simply send to the blood lab. An autoantibody test is looking for multiple types of autoantibodies that develop with type 1 diabetes when the immune system is attacking the cells in your pancreas. While there can be some signs of autoimmune disease in people with type 2, the type 1 autoantibody panel will really identify if your diabetes is the result of an autoimmune disease, type 1, versus a metabolic disorder, type 2. Misdiagnosing type 1 diabetes as type 2 diabetes is so common. And I know you're probably thinking, well, wait, that couldn't be me. I don't have anyone in my family with type 1. Or you could be thinking, well, my dad had type 2, so mine's gotta be type 2. Well, hey, I hate to break it to you, but your dad might have been misdiagnosed also. If you have older relatives who were taking insulin for their type 2 diabetes, they might have been misdiagnosed. Just saying, not necessarily just because they were on insulin, but because you are now being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes when you are not showing any of the other common signs of type 2 diabetes. High triglycerides, high cholesterol, being overweight or living with obesity, high blood pressure. These things really all develop together. So if you are relatively lean or a quote unquote normal weight, a healthy weight according to BMI stuff, you probably don't have type 2 diabetes. You've probably been misdiagnosed because the clinicians at your hospital or your doctor's office believe that type 2 diabetes develops in adulthood and only children can develop type 1. And why does it matter? Hey, maybe you don't need insulin yet. Okay, but there are clinical trials going on right now studying medications, studying therapies, and even existing drugs like Ozempic, looking at their ability to delay the full attack on your pancreas, to protect your pancreas's ability to produce insulin. So if you just kind of stay in that type 2 denial land and you don't take action to get the right diagnosis, you're missing out on the potential opportunity to participate in a clinical trial that could actually help you preserve your pancreas's ability to produce insulin. Take action, ask your doctor for a C-peptide test and type 1 diabetes autoantibody testing. Get the right diagnosis.